Welcome to Digital Marketing ROI, the podcast that connects marketing to your business's revenue and covers everything you need to know to stay up to date in this crazy digital marketing world.
Welcome to Digital Marketing ROI. I'm Shannon Allen, your host, and today I'm joined by my senior digital marketing consultant, Rory Kemerer. Hi, Rory.
Hi.
Well, this is kind of fun today for me. I've been doing kind of a segment with some of my sellers, and Rory and Carly Mandagore are my senior sellers, both been here 10 years. But why don't you give our listeners a little background? It's hard to believe you've been here 10 years now, but let them know a little bit about what brought you to Federated and your experience and what you've been doing the last 10 years here.
Sure. Summer 2015, I think, is when I interviewed for this job. I can't remember exactly how I came across it, but I had moved back to Indiana and was looking for something. And I remember reading the job description for the digital marketing. Well, actually, no, it would have been
the specialist job.
The digital specialist for the radio stations. So for the first 5 years at Federated, I helped disseminate Shannon's information and training to the radio sellers and went on appointments with them and reported and did a little training locally. And then the last 5 years, I've been in sales for Federated Digital. So that happened in 2020. And it was an interesting year to start. Yes, right. It was an interesting year to start. So I've been doing sales for Federated Digital since then, and that's been its own journey.
Well, and you and I talk about this a lot. I never want to say sales sometimes because you're so much more, right? Our titles do tell it. We are marketing consultants, specifically in the digital world. But I always say our challenge is we're just problem solvers for our clients, right?
For sure. Absolutely.
Problem solvers, educators, marketing experts. So we hold a lot of titles. I think a consultant is a good word for that, a sales consultant, but it's a lot more because it's not about sales. It's about the marketing and how it specifically revolves around digital. And that's what you're great at.
I hope so.
So let's start right in with that whole fact. You've been with us for 10 years now. What would you say are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned while working for us these last 10 years?
A couple things come to mind. I would say, one, there's a lot of power in doing what you say you will, whether that's for clients or for your team. That's something that's kind of stuck with me in both roles that I've had. There's a lot of power in that. I would also say what works today might not work tomorrow. So always thinking about that, whatever your role, or even if you're a business owner. I feel like I've seen that played out so many times over the last 10 years. So what works today might not work tomorrow. I also think, and this is something that I think I've shared with Shannon a little bit personally, but confidence and humility go hand in hand. I think sometimes we have to humble ourselves or, change the way that we were going, even if it does take some humbling so that we can get on the right track. And it takes confidence to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think that's a really important thing. Confidence and ego go hand in hand sometimes, right? Understanding and admitting that maybe we don't always know everything, whether that's us or the clients, right? Both of us. And that this is constantly changing. Everything we do is constantly changing.
For sure. For sure.
Well, so that kind of brings me to number 2, specifically around digital marketing landscape. So what shifts have you thought about in the last 10 years that maybe caught businesses off guard that we weren't really prepared for?
I think there's 3 things that come to mind. Obviously, probably more recent things. It's a little harder to go back to the beginning and think about that.
Things change so often, but yeah, maybe in the last couple of years, what would you say?
I would say one of the biggest shifts I've seen, and this is something that we have been focusing on with clients, is a shift from traditional TV to streaming video.
Yeah, for sure.
That's something we've been working on the last couple of years. And as we've been working on it, we've only seen that shift increase. I would say the other thing is the role of AI and how that's changed really everything. It's changed search. It's changed how people search, but it's also allowed us to access to more data, which is a huge advantage. So probably those two things. I could go into detail about Facebook changes over the years, but
Yeah,
they change all the time.
that's
I don't know if,
constant, right?
yes, I don't know if those have been as paramount.
Well, and think about this. You've been selling what we call streaming video or video OTT, CTV, however we want to put the label on it. You've been selling it many years. However, it continuously grows, right? We finally hit that tipping point, which means there are more consumers streaming video than are watching linear TV or cable combined, right? The tipping point has happened. I would say that's
Yes.
the big change with that. But just the education of it, right? We just did a training this week on just different ways to think about how we can strategize CTV with our clients, right? It continually evolves and grows. And for the first time ever, we can say things like we did for display, which is we have access to almost 93% of inventory out there. And that's how it is with display, but it took us a lot of years to get here, right?
Right. Right. Well, that inventory had to grow with viewership growing to an extent.
Right. Well, and let's talk about AI. So think about this, just in the last couple of years, what were some of the early conversations you had with clients versus what you talk about now with AI?
I think initially there was a lot of fear and a lot of unknowns. I would say now a lot of the conversations we have with them are positive surrounding AI.
Right.
Shannon and I were on a meeting recently and talking about how certain things that we've been preaching are even more important with the ongoing growth of AI, but we're able to guide our clients through that and they seem really comfortable with it. So I think there's less fear and there's more hunger for knowledge from clients as opposed to what's this mean? What is this going to look like? It's just a part of everybody's daily life.
Well, and it's there to make our life easier, not more difficult, right? It's not there to replace a human editing something, but definitely the advantages with targeting an AI have really increased over the years, right? What we're able to do with Google, the knowledge graph has been part of AI for years. They just now show it and have it say, brought to you by AI. It's always been there. The knowledge graph has been part of a Google search for years. Now they show that it's an AI search, right? They labeled it differently.
Yeah, and that's another piece, Shannon, that I think people don't realize is this has been happening before the big blanket term AI was laid on everything.
Right.
I think as a team, we had a moment where we're like, oh, this is some of what we've always been doing. It's just growing at an exponential rate now.
Yeah, exactly. But I agree with you. Those would be the two things. If you were to ask me the same question, 100%, those would be the two things I would talk about. So let's shift a little bit. You work with a lot of different clients and partners and really some very specific industries and categories, from ag equipment to plastic surgery and aesthetics. What marketing challenges are universal versus industry specific, would you say, specifically digital marketing?
I think one of the biggest things that I see with almost everybody is that idea of this is what we want to do versus this is what we need to do.
Right.
Another way to say it might be this is what we think people want. This is what we think our consumers want, or this is who we think our ideal consumer is versus who it actually is and what they actually want. I feel like I have conversations about that almost weekly with prospects or clients where we're realizing the data is telling us something different. You might think that this is how people are searching or what people want from you, and we're seeing that it's not.
Right. Well, I think a great example, one of your clients as a credit union, looking at how consumers search for checking, which is something that's a priority. Really, in 2025, people are not searching for checking. They're searching for where can I make the most money, right? The savings accounts, the high yield return. But when we first started the conversation, even a couple months ago, we were all focused on the checking as a priority. But once we saw the data, we realized the way that consumers for a credit union are searching, right? It changed.
For sure. Yeah.
And that's really interesting. And it's always comes back. And this is what I love about our job is you can take any industry, right? Whether that's ag equipment, credit union, it could be a car dealer, but it's all about the consumer journey. Now, each of those industries have a different journey, right? I was doing some research on automotive today, and, I don't think there's one person out there that doesn't start their journey for a car online. I think it's like a 97% of where consumers are shopping is online first before they ever walk onto a lot, right? So it's different for automotive. It might be very different for a different industry like agriculture. Like they might not be looking online. They might be walking into a local dealer that sells that farming equipment, but each industry is going to be different and each consumer journey is going to be different, right?
Yes, but I would say to that each consumer journey almost all of the time has a digital element to it.
Yes.
There's
Yeah.
some type of digital element
Yeah.
that's worked in there.
Yep. I agree with that. That's a really good point. Well, and I love that you work. That's the best part of our job. And I don't think everybody understands that is nothing stays stale with us, right? We're always strategically problem solving for different types of industries. And we have to wear a lot of different hats to help our clients. We have to understand a lot of business owners' specific goals and needs to really help them with the strategy. And I think sometimes that's what's missing from just a traditional seller, somebody that's just selling TV. Their goal is to solve the problem from a TV standpoint with the solutions they have. Our job isn't just one solution, it's all of digital marketing, but we also need to understand how traditional plays a role in that consumer journey as well. Wouldn't you agree?
I would.
All right. So here's another one. What's the most common mistake local businesses make when trying to handle digital marketing in-house? I think this comes up a lot with us.
Well, I think one could be tied into our last couple points, which would be not looking at the data, not looking at what's available to them. And sometimes they don't know how to have access to that, or they don't even know what they're looking at. So that would be one element. I would say another mistake would be you would be shocked, regardless of company size, company success, the lack of tying back to ROI.
Right.
I was speaking to a prospect that the other day that I've developed a pretty solid relationship with, and they were saying, "Isn't it amazing how successful some businesses are in spite of themselves?" And it's true. It's these,
Yeah.
there's no, for lack of a better term, there's no strategy behind it. And I think I see that so often when they're just an in-house team focusing on making their boss happy, focusing on overall branding, quote unquote. There's a lot more that goes into it than that, or should
Yeah.
be.
Well, and I don't like to use the word like bad data or mistakes, but sometimes the best part of our job is looking at an SEM segment that's not performing well and to bring it back to a client and say, this isn't performing well. We're not in trouble for it. It's really the blueprint to tell us what we need to do next, right? So that data, and sometimes when you're like your point of somebody in-house is trying to please their boss or just trying to check off their list, where our list is about ROI, right? Which we'll come back to at the end. But I love that you brought that up because in-house versus an agency, what are your big rocks? If you're doing it in-house, what are your goals that you're trying to achieve? And sometimes when it's in-house, what I see is the education, unfortunately, isn't there because you're wearing so many hats. My main job as the CRO is to constantly be educating and training everybody in our company so that we can go back and train our clients. And I think when somebody brings it in-house, unless your company is providing that training for you, it's very hard to understand the changes that happen so quickly. You know, specifically with SEM right now and what's going on with AI, all the changes that are constantly going on with CTV, right, and streaming video. So that lack of education, I think, is there's just not enough time for it sometimes in-house, right?
I agree.
So what should a business look for if they want to partner with an agency when it comes to their digital strategy?
I can think of a couple things to piggyback off of what we just talked about. I would make sure that whoever you're working with, and sometimes you don't realize this until it's too late, but asking the question, how are you going to tie this back to revenue? How are you going to tie this back to ROI, to results for us? Also, I would say someone that's willing to educate and willing to lead you in a different direction than what initially you wanted to go. Someone that can tell you no to something, say, I don't think we should do this. I wouldn't do this. And then there's an element of you really want someone that has access to some things you don't have as well.
Right.
Whether that's another level of optimization, a team behind them, whether that's data that you don't have access to, I would look at that. Do they have access to something I don't have, or can they provide something that we don't have?
Right. Nope, I like that. Well, and we've talked a lot in a few of these questions about ROI, but I'm going to bring it back because it's our last question of the podcast, right? How do we bring it back to ROI? But I'm going to switch it up a little bit because you do a great job with your clients of always talking about ROI. But what would be something you have recently started to do with your clients or have learned when it comes to ROI? What would be one piece of advice you could give clients specifically when it comes to how we're measuring it? Can you think of maybe one or two items for that to bring it back to ROI?
Well, I would kind of go back to something you've talked to us about over the last couple years, but that has really been top of mind recently as we head into end of the year strategies with our clients, which is know your numbers, know how many of which product you're selling a month, know your profit margins on those products. That's the only way you're going to be able to measure anything. And that's something you've always told us is normally we have that conversation more as we head into the new year, but know your numbers. You should have that information. And it's amazing. There's some clients who don't have that information readily available.
Yeah, more than we realize, right? I mean, we get so busy running, like what I would say, in the business. We're not working on the business, right? And the best way to work on the business is to understand what one customer is worth, right? What one product or service you sell is worth. And it's always my favorite question when we ask in the needs, which is give me your top 3 priorities of what you sell or do. And then give me the top 3 in order of profitability. And are they the same? And do they know the answer to that? Right?
Yeah, that's a great question to make sure that we're always asking for sure.
Well, that's good. I love always talking to my consultants. We use the word seller, but as I said, I think you are a problem solver. You're a strategist and your clients are lucky to have you. So,
thank you.
Thanks for listening and tune in to our next episode of Digital Marketing ROI.
You've been listening to Digital Marketing ROI from Federated Digital Solutions. Do you have an idea for a future episode or a burning digital marketing question? Text ROI to 45364 to get a link where you can share your idea. Subscribe to get new episodes every other Thursday, plus Tip Tuesday insights every week.
Podcasts by Federated Media.